being religious and environmental conditions, so that all will come under the lordship or headship of Christ. The religious structure, especially, well, when I say engage in the religious structure, that it very often the governance structure is aligned to some religious organization, and they have their gathering, and they will get their bath, and so on and so forth, and parchment paper becomes a feature. And this is not unique to Rosedown. In fact, it is a feature of many inner city community, and that is how we sought to repair the breach in Rosedown. How do we do it? You know, we talk about its contextual nature, rubber meeting road. You know, at the end of the day, when we engage in mission, it is a tough task. It is a challenging task. And we take our cue from Jesus, specifically as it relates to you know, the contextual nature, taking the culture very, very seriously. I have a quotation here from 1 Corinthians 9:20-23. To the Jews I became a Jew, Paul speaking, to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but I'm under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became weak. To win the weak, I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might have some, I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessing. And this is Paul speaking. You know, this is really one of the greatest examples of what it means to be in solidarity with your context, in solidarity with the people who you are serving, right? So just some pointers on this contextual nature of the mission, resonating with people's lived experience. The passage that we just read is really about that, where we are resonating with people's lived experience. We have to know people. We have to be aware of people's circumstances, whether it is their living condition. We have to be aware of the extent to which, especially in a time like these, children are with or without tablets, and those who do have tablets, what about the connectivity issues? It is in that context that we are able to be in solidarity with people. All right, I'll be a story of the Lord's Supper, which is a story, you know, but I will not get into that right now, maybe never. All right. Mission is rooted in Jesus Christ, who in fact was a Jew. And, you know, we don't just say that in passing that he was a Jew. That was serious business. The fact that he came as a Jew, an oppressed group of people, and a group of people also who oppressed others, you know, over the century. Jesus identified himself with them in that particular culture, embrace elements of the culture, because we do that as well. We embrace our culture, but we also critique the culture, because there are elements within the culture that need to be transformed. And so we respect also the culture. We talk respect without romance. That is, respect for people's culture without having an uncritical commitment to it. Jesus, for example, embraced the Jewish culture, born as a Jew, although he had many things to say about it. All right. When I say respect without romance, because sometimes we can become very romantic or sentimental about particular culture, so much so that we are unable to see some of the ills within that culture, because we are so drawn to it. Perhaps the best example, I don't know if it is a good example, but I'm going to use it nevertheless, in terms of respect without romance, where you can be so drawn sentimentally to a particular culture that sometimes you give some of the ills within that culture a pass without wanting to critique it. Cuba for me is perhaps a good example, because it is, when you travel to Cuba, it can be so easy. Well, I mean, somebody like me, for example, to become so romantically attached to the culture. Stopped in time. I mean, Cuba is like a big museum. A place stopped in time. You know, and you can see that, and there are some good, great things about it, you know, which I really, really want to get into. Great things about the culture, but there are also some things about the culture. So that is what I mean when I say respect without being overly romantic, so that you are unable, because remember that our mission is to transform, and therefore we have to have that, you know, that spirit of discernment, the insight, the foresight, and so on. Celebrating in the glory, where, you know, again, it is about solidarity with people in their joy, celebrating the glory. We rejoice with people, but also we cry in the gloom, because in our context, and in many contexts, and in every context, there are many stories of gloom, and parts of our responsibility is really to identify with people's joy, and also identify with their sorrows. This is something that we have been saying over and over again, that love for people goes a far way as a guide. Genuine love answers the question of sensitivity and compassion. When we love people, it is easier to be sensitive to their needs. It is easier to demonstrate compassion. And so that has to be one of the most important things if we are going to be engaged in mission. Loving people. God's grace had to work over time. A section of the Bible was not available to the native, you know, the people. Yeah, that is a long story where missionaries in the past interpreted scripture for people, and certain parts of the Bible that, you know, were not read to them. In fact, they have what they call in some places the slave Bible, There are those passages. So, for example, you can find this the story of the Exodus in the slave Bible, because their intent was to keep the people down. Right? Bishop Tutu is believed to have popularized a quote that was originally attributed to Jomo Kenyatta, who said, when the missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible and we had the land. They said, that is the missionaries, let us pray, we close our eyes, and when we opened them, we had the Bible and they had the land. Yeah, and that is part of some of the historical hurdles that we have to overcome. I heard Dr. Vassel had something else to say about that, when they opened the Bible, of course, they recognize that they were created in the image and in the likeness of God. And therefore, we are not supposed to be slaves. We are created in the image and the likeness of God. We are people of worth. We're saying that it makes the task of sharing the gospel a little more difficult for some people because they are sensitive to the history. Some people are sensitive to the history, and therefore, a little challenge with that. All right. So what we are going to look at now is small church matters. Small church matters, and maybe especially in a time like now, COVID being on, small church matters. But before we jump onto that, at this point, I can take one or two questions or comment, whatever it is that anyone may have. Anyone? Okay, moving on. Small churches matter. I think that one of the things that we have to come to grips with is that most of our churches, most of the churches in our denomination will never be huge, never. I mean, certainly in Jamaica, most of our churches are not mega churches. And sometimes as leaders and sometimes as members, that can be a cause of some kind of insecurity. But that need not be the case, yeah? Because indeed, small churches do matter and matter in a very, very big way. How so? In transforming members into missionaries, all right? Ministers letting go of clericalism, that is, where leadership is centered around the clergy. We talk about a very hierarchical structure where there is clergy and where there is laity. But part of the remit of the church in general, and I believe that the small churches have, to a great extent, have an advantage in terms of transforming members into missionaries. Yeah, because they have a group of persons who they can teach. People do not have to be anonymous, like in large churches where sometimes a lot of people get lost, especially in a time like now, COVID. Oh man, a lot of people are lost, even or small churches, but especially in larger churches. All churches facilitates this intimacy and fellowship, right? And whereas manageability, the ability to manage, right? Uh, yeah, we don't need to get into all of that. There's an excellent, but intimacy and fellowship. And we are aware of that. The kind of intimacy and fellowship that small churches afford, and the ability to manage. When I say manageability, we're not talking about control in a negative way, but really just to manage things. Much more difficult in larger churches. Supply officers to other stations. What do I mean like that? That sometimes the small churches, because of their ability to impact and to teach, they are able to supply members from these churches elsewhere that are in need. It is significant that our church, the church at Rostown, for example, I mean, most of our bishops came out of that particular setting, you know, and perhaps that augurs well for the sitting pastor. Supplying officers to other stations, yeah, the ability to have a captive audience so that we can teach, so that we can, just engage together in a very positive way. This is a quote where it says, Carl Dudley says, that when small church is measured by human relationships, the small church is the largest expression of the Christian faith, suggesting that because of the nature sometimes of those relationship, the human relationship that exists. WhatsApp group here and there, and most people are covered within those groups. Singles fellowship, marriage fellowship, and so on and so forth. And especially when that involves a mosaic of ethnicities and personalities living in Christian love. The Mosaic Church, for example, in London, is a very small church, and in that setting, better able to therefore manage some of the personality issues as relates to ethnicity, rather than the bigger the church, the harder it is to manage those circumstances. So that challenges will be inevitable. Always saying that this is the nature of life. Generally, we can deal with one more. It represents small church an opportunity to practice Christian love, especially through respect and tolerance. Because sometimes you really can't avoid. It is inevitable that I have to step past Patricia Sanford. It is inevitable in the small church setting that I can't hide from Robert Stewart. So it represents an opportunity to practice Christian love, especially through respect and tolerance. It is the right size in which to love God and neighbor, and it is the right size to be all that God has called a church to be. Quote the words of the Governor General, or at least to paraphrase it. And I think I have already mentioned this at the outset when we look at some of the objectives that we would love to achieve with these studies over the four weeks. And the Governor General said at one of our conferences that it is better to be a small church with a big impact than to be a big church with a small impact. All right. So this is really just to appreciate the fact that some of our churches will really never be big, but it does not mean that we cannot be ineffective, that we cannot be effective, right? We can be effective as small church. Now, this is not an advertisement for our churches to remain small. Don't get it wrong. That is really not it, right? But it is really an appreciation of the fact that we are going to be small, relatively speaking, but that does not mean that we cannot be very, 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 very effective. All right. Some of the myths surrounding large church. Large, dynamic, growing churches are healthy. Some people equate size with health, and that is not necessarily the case. Bigger is better in some people's mind. On the other hand, small churches are de facto struggling, parochial, maintenance-oriented, and at risk. That is not necessarily the case. So there is this myth that surrounds large church. So as small church people, we really don't need to feel insecure. We are doing our thing. Karl Rahner says that small congregation can avail free for real missionary adventure and apostolic self-confidence. And of course, this has to do with the ability to engage in the small setting where we teach and we learn from each other. And in that context, it is it facilitates the ability for missionary adventure and apostolic self-confidence. Just being, confident as somebody who has been sent. Small churches can facilitate that. Small church can sometimes risk ministries that large ones deem undesirable, right? I don't know if I can think of a situation like that where small church can sometimes risk ministries engaging in some situations that large churches, deems undesirable. It is really not desirable for us to get there. We have too many irons in the fire. That perhaps is going to be a distraction for our bigger vision. And we can reel off many examples where there's a sentence where we have eked out a niche in mission, risking ministries like prison ministries. But prison ministries, I'm thinking about a particular situation. Somebody like Marilyn Thompson. Marilyn Thompson would be a great person to have a conversation about risk ministry. So there was a time, and Marilyn Thompson was the person in Rosetown, was familiar with everybody, almost, and everybody's situation, knew some people long before I knew them. One of them in particular You know where I met him? I mean, he had a reputation on the street. And I meet him in general penitentiary. We talk about risking some ministries. I met him at the general penitentiary. Why did I go and meet him? And yeah, let me just say, perhaps that this would be a good example in terms of sometimes niche ministry, not even so niche, but just being discerning, just being aware of your context and possibilities, negative, that you can be proactive and deal with, or positive that you can just embrace. You know, this fellow was in prison, never met him, was about to be released, I heard through the grapevine, but that would have been potentially risky, you know, possibility of clashes with other individuals. And so I went to meet him in prison, call the prison and let them know that I'm passing the air and I do this. You know, met with him on a couple of occasions, and I believe that meeting would have eclipsed some potential tension and other things. You know, that is what we talk about. We talk about small church, sometimes risk ministries that some might see undesirable. Being on the margins can provide fresh opportunities for offering bold witness to those, especially at the margin. Yeah, those who are in need. The small church could be elected for extraordinary or mission service. The small church could be elected for extraordinary mission service. Sometimes it takes some thought, but I believe that some of those thoughts can be ignited, facilitated by love for people. Part of the strength of bigger church is cultural sensitivity, they say, values, movement in technology, and so on and so forth. You know, why sometimes what the big church have them things they're locking up when it comes on to the technology. In fact, that's why some people are drawn to them. They have technology locked. I mean, I've been to a couple with acoustic. It's out of this world. The acoustic sound like Winston Holiness Christian Church on a Sunday morning. Because when I'm a fool, you know, roast down thing up, you know. Don't think roast down thing up the technology. I mean, you know, yeah, it can compete with many. It is really up something to. So these are just some of the things that we have been saying. Missionary focus, church, pursued in the context of the community with the pastor giving oversight, members taking ownership and doing the ministries themselves, develop a vision for ministry. All right, so let me just run past that. Can I just skip that as well? The language we have. Perhaps we can go back to it, but I just want to make sure that I get through this. Are there any questions at this time?
Yes, Pastor.
Yes.
When you say small church, what numbers are you looking at?
Number. Um,
Yes, sir.
yeah, you know, I would consider Roast and Holiness Christian Church uh, a small church. Uh,
You're looking at the capacity that we can hold or the amount of
No, man,
persons.
we're talking about membership.
Okay.
Not in terms of capacity. We're talking about
Okay.
membership. And when I say small churches, just look around at our churches,
Yeah.
uh, except for the cathedral. Well, ex- except for the Portmore Church. Our churches are relatively small. But among this, our small churches, we have some that stand out a little bit more. The Ensom City Church, Rosetown Church, Black River Church, Waterworks, and so on and so forth.
That's
But yes, so without providing a number, that is what ballpoint. Somebody else was coming in.
there are two hands.
There are two hands raised.
Yes. Please go.
Dr. Carter, the issue of number,
Yes, Bishop.
would like you to elaborate a little bit more on the small church in terms of number, because I was of the impression
Mhm.
that small church was not necessarily the size of the building, but the number was significant
Yeah.
for in our context. All right, most of our churches, as you rightly said, are by building are small.
Mhm.
But tell me, please tell me,
Yeah.
in terms of number,
Yes.
in
Well-
terms of number, yes.
Okay. Yeah, man. It is almost impossible to have a small building and to have a large church in terms of membership, unless you have several services, on a particular Sunday. So although our focus is primarily in terms of membership, but it goes without saying that the buildings are small because the numbers are small. Well, I don't know which comes first, but certainly the numbers are small, and therefore there is no need to have a building like say the Portmore Church. But I'm suggesting that that is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes we play the numbers game, and that can be problematic. Looking on other churches without taking into consideration our context, right? You're not going to get a big church in Argyle Mountain. You're not going to get a massive, There are exceptional circumstances where there's a history, where sometimes the quality of the offering, when I say offering in terms of what one offer, can be of such that people go anywhere to take. That is becoming more and more difficult with our crime and violence situation in Jamaica.
Dr. Carter?
And especially in the, you're not hearing me?
Dr. Carter?
Yes, Joy.
I was just telling him that Robert has his hand up also.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just finishing this point. Where was I before? What was the point I was making? Yeah. Anyway, come in, Robert.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, Robert.
Yes, I think you were making the point that that the size of the church is the size of the church is also often reflected in its economic base or its ability, well, you know, its ability to the size building to it's sort of determine the size of the community or whatever. Sort of determine the size building and and such like. And of course, I wanted to speak on along the line of the you know, the large versus the small church. There is no doubt. There's no question about the certain potential within the small church as compared to the large churches, the mass churches, in terms of closeness, you know, sense of belonging and sense of knowing and being known and being part of a community that cares and demonstrate that care in very vivid and tangible ways. That it becomes more challenging in the mass churches, right? But my question, so while that potential is there, the potential for more closer interaction in the small church. And we know some large churches have come up with measures to bridge those gaps, those distance gaps. But my question is whether, the potential is so much in the size of the church or the vision of the minister, because you know, some people, the vision of the minister and the leadership of the church often attracts or repels people, right? According to the vision, some of these mass churches, you know, what they feed their congregation with, right? Them don't even talk about heaven and hell. They don't talk about hell and heaven as some, you know, well, hell completely no, and heaven, you know, is not so much a futuristic terms, but that you can experience it in the now, and such like, and things that people love to hear and which attracts a huge following, and especially following that is consistent with contemporary times, right? And because the objective is for large following, and perhaps part of that rationale is tied up in the economic base of the church itself, that the larger following, the sort of people you can attract will also determine, you know, the economic base of the church and its ability to support and develop all sort of programs and such like. While another vision, which is more ministry oriented, and you know, another vision might say, well, we're not so much interested in building an empire here. What we want to do is to reach people right across the spectrum. And as soon as their church, you know, grow to a certain extent, they are looking afield for, you know, how they can grow the ministry outside of their physical building and such like. So I wonder, you know, whether much of the stuff that you're talking about isn't a function of the vision of the leadership, rather than just big church, small church, big church versus small church per se.
Yeah, well, that's a mouthful, sir. And you are right to include the argument about the vision. But to be fair, Patrick, there are large churches that have managed to not only be large numerically, but also in terms of the vision and what they have to offer. There are some churches that have managed to have a good, a useful program that is God-centered and so on and so forth, you know. But I'm just saying that we really have to be careful and you want to be a little bit reluctant sometimes to be too critical, you know, of some churches. But man, one of the things that COVID has afforded us is the ability to just move around in terms of churches and sermons and messages and so on and so forth. You know, and what is popular and attractive very often is really and truly fall short in terms of what the true gospel message is enough. You know, and I thought about that, you know, and it can be, and that is really true of many of the larger churches. And sometimes you wonder, you know, why that is so. Well, you know, it is really human nature. We love a good performance, and some of us are just that, great performers, and people are attracted to that. You know, it is almost like a sport event. You go to a Sunday afternoon, you know, you're going for some kind of entertainment, you know, and sadly, a lot of the bigger churches, you know, tend to be that almost entertainment centers, you know, and I am not even suggesting, Patrick, for one, necessarily that it is deliberate. Sometimes it is really what they know, and there are small churches on the other hand, leader, a visionary, small church might not have the number, in fact, does not have the number, but in terms of its impact, in terms of authenticity and credibility, you know, and those things are very, very important. You know, but it is a very important discussion to have, and of course, we are saying at the same time, we're not decrying small churches because big churches, because we want to become small. We all openly want to have more numbers, people getting saved, and so on and so forth. You know, but it has to be more than that. It has to be more than just the number. It has to be about the impact. It has to be about the quality of the people that are being produced. You know, because just like a football stadium, I mean, if you have maybe that's not a good analogy. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Dr.
So
Carter, may I?
Yes, you may. I can't say no to the bishop.
The small church in size is big on impact.
Can be.
The last speaker alluded to vision and leadership type, quality and quantity, whatever. Okay, which I am gathering that he was saying that the impact, this small impact is conditioned by the type of vision and leadership in the given small church, and which I would tend to agree with if that's what he's saying, because in our context we know of numerous settings where there are small churches with significant visible impact. Of course, there are the exemplary ones like Rostov, for example.
Yeah.
So is it that you're glorifying small church? And if so, how do you justify that?
No, I am not necessarily glorifying small churches and decrying large churches. I am just suggesting that it would be useful that we take very, very seriously when we talk about church. What is it we are talking about really? What is it that is most important to church? Is it about the number? Is it about the impact? Yeah. So it really cannot be about glorifying the small church in a vacuum, because there are obviously, you don't need to even say that small churches. There are some churches that are small because there are lack of vision. There's no question about that. There are small churches that are small that have minimal impact and perhaps need to be closed. And there are large churches that have managed to bridge the gap, that have been able to have the numbers, but also there's quality in terms of what is being offered. Obviously, those things are going to come with their challenges. So it is not so much small versus large, but it is an appreciation of your own context. And I'm suggesting that some of our churches will never be big, will never be huge in terms of numbers. It is just impossible because of location, etc., and other factors. But notwithstanding the size, they can have, using Marilyn, one of Marilyn's words, humongous impact. Yeah, big impact, notwithstanding their size. We are also suggesting sometimes the small do have some advantages. The ability to fellowship, the ability to be what God wants us to be, especially if you have a kind of leader that Robert speaks about, someone who is a visionary and therefore who is able to mentor individuals who are able to mentor. I catch up with that very quickly because as a mentor, it's really it is not just the individual pastor, but I think that there needs to be a particular culture. Sometimes that's part of the problem too. We want a messiah. Over the years, it has been part of our culture, politically and otherwise, where people are looking for a messiah-like figure who is going to deliver. But more than that, there needs to be a particular culture that everyone can buy into. All right.
Lots of clarity.
So reshaping and retooling church and mission in a pandemic. Wow. The big thing, listen on. It's that thing that can take us a year. How has the pandemic with the accompanying restrict? Is that 8:30? 3? Somebody answer me, please.
9:33.
33.
I mean, 9:33. Yeah, okay. All right, let me just wind up. Reshaping and retooling church and mission in a pandemic. Roston is such a blessed church in terms of resources. Man, is that them have everything. And when you think about something like this, about reshaping and retooling church and mission in a pandemic, there are personnel. I mean, you have your pastor, you have Dr. Tina Myers, you have somebody like Minister Simpson. I mean, these people are experts when it comes down to some of these things, reshaping and retooling. So, for example, one question that might be useful to consider is, Does there need to be some kind of interim mission statement to deal with the pandemic, or perhaps even a post-pandemic mission statement? Because, and of course, that is going to involve a lot of pre-planning and so on and so forth, forward thinking. Because if we don't think about some of these things, you know, why sometimes we can, you know, church can open up, you know, church can reopen as it used to be. And we are expecting the numbers, and the numbers are really not there, you know. So we have to plan for those things, you know. Yeah, is there the need, you know, I'm asking the question, for some kind of interim mission statement, planning to deal with some of those eventually. All right, and the question, how has the pandemic with the accompanying restriction impacted life in your space? I'm talking about all of us. Mandeville, Ensom City, Florida, Canada, everywhere. How has it impacted? You know, compounded by the fact that while we were already dealing with too much crime and violence, especially violence against women and girls. That is one of the phenomena of the pandemic, you know. A lot of violence against women and girls. Yeah. Where violence in some places have been moved from the streets to the home. There's a spike in domestic violence. Suddenly the space becomes small because the children are around and they're making noise and we have to shut them up, because it is still within many parts of our culture where the children need to be silent. You know, and the children can be problematic, and many parents are recognized and realizing now, and they should have realized long ago, the challenges that some of our teachers are having because of some of these students, who are a big problem. Can't settle down. Sometimes parents are a big part of the problem too. Ask Dr. Troop about that. The extent to which parents are involved, engaged in the life of their kids. Man, I've heard some dopey stories about the lack of involvement of parents. Man, oh man. Classroom should have 27 persons or so, 30 persons, and there are only 7 persons online. There are issues in terms of connectivity and people having the device and so on. But in many instances, that is really not the case where we're having these problems, you know. So, and you know, we're raising these questions because, you know, we have to focus, I think, refocus in terms of missions and ministry. Every crisis shines a spotlight on the inequity in social structures. We come back again to some of the social ills within the culture, within the country, all over the world. And these inequities are accentuated during this time. The restriction has worsened inequality in regions where this is an issue. In certain parts of America, or that's America, the Americas, so that includes Latin America, North America, South America, the Caribbean. Almost half of the total student population do not have access to online education. And those who have their connectivity issues unemployment plummeting. There is a challenge for some to move their service online. The new norm. Some of us are doing extremely well in terms of that. Some people are, some people are doing very well at that. And you wonder now, if part of our ministry, how can we help some of those churches, whether our neighbor, not necessarily within the denomination, who are struggling in terms of dealing with some of these technological issues, because we want the same thing, the transformation of the communities. Some people's faith have been impacted in significant ways. There's not people backsliding. A lot of people are backsliding for various reasons. A lot of people's faith have been threatened because they think that it is a lack of faith why the church, the pastors have to obey the government and close down church. How can that be? Or can the government dictate to church? There are people who are having those challenges. People's faith are being challenged all over. Some will believe that this is judgment. This is really judgment from God. They're saying that people's faith are being challenged, all over. And the question is, what does the ministry of presence look like in this scenario? That is again part of the irony, because the ministry of presence is a critical thing. And just to explain what the ministry of presence is, it's really just to be there. And we talk about it, especially in circumstances of bereavement, where people are in grief. And sometimes people wonder, what do I say to those people? What do I say to somebody who has lost a loved one? And sometimes the answer is nothing. Just be there for them. They understand that. In fact, the more you speak, sometimes the worst things become for them. They don't necessarily want to hear anything about your good intention of God talk. They don't want that. And ministry of presence is critical in those circumstances. And very often, ministry of presence is very tactile. It is really about touching. Problem with touching now. What does ministry of presence look like? These are some serious questions, I believe, that we have to look at. A lot of people, and I can speak about the Roaston experience. People just want to see particular faces, just one from, they just want, it gives them a sense of assurance when they can see some healthy faces around them, right? And COVID has made that very, very difficult. And the question is, how does one deal with that situation? COVID has caused some of us to rethink our theology about church. What is church? The church can no longer be seen as a building, but more human, a community of believers. We're all over a community who exists to a great extent in cyberspace, but it is a community of believers. It's a building. Does the church need to articulate in clearer terms life after death? Just something in terms of reshaping and retooling, especially with sometimes, people are so afraid these days. There are so many persons who have lost their life, near and far. And the question is, as we engage, reshape, and retool, Do we need to articulate a clearer theology, life after death? Is this a time for the retooling of the welfare department of churches to deal with the fallout due to COVID? Because at Bethune Avenue, we have always said that whereas welfare is not the flagship of where of cure. When I say cure, cure is the church's welfare arm. Church not is the church's social intervention arm, not welfare. Church, the acronym Church and Urban Renewal Enterprise. And the question is this a time for the retooling of the welfare department? The point I was making is that whereas the flagship of the church of cure is not welfare, it is really about development, dealing with the issue at the point of the root. But there is a need for welfare. People need food. People need tablets. And it is really, really, and so great, to have people who are just forward thinking. I mean, the singles are having a drive to help indigents or entrenched down. And that is really great. So we're really just asking these questions in terms of reshaping and retooling. And I just thought that a good way just to think about it is really just to ask these questions. Is there a need to determine who are the disabled in your community, for example? Mission this enough. Is gospel this enough? Who are the disabled? Who are the persons who are unable to fend for them? Who are unable to fend for themselves? On the line even more because of COVID. And what can church do? Reverend Dr. Emilio Hamstanard, I have a quote here, and I should have included the entire quote, but it's a useful quote from, so he's a Cuban theologian. I don't know him, but he is from the Matanzas Theological Seminary, which is where Alvin and I did some studies in our program, where he says churches are learning to use technology to worship and to build capacity, but also to struggle for a more just world in which the digital divide can be overcome. We have seen Roston Church, under able leadership dealing with things like that, right? So how do we end? We don't have time to go through all that we have gone through. Administrators, the church, technical personnel, Svenita Tarrant, Joy Ellis, and others have made the presentation available online. But just briefly, to say that one of the passages that we started off with, Matthew 28, 18 to 20, which answers the question, who must be involved in ministry? Bishop asks a question sometimes, or engaged us. Does the clergy, it seems as if we have been big on the clergy doing a lot of things, but Jesus spoke to his disciples, and therefore is speaking to us. So So it answers the question who. It is all of us who must be engaged in what we have been talking about over these several weeks. And why do we do so? Luke 4:18 answers that question as to why. That why still stands. That why is still relevant. People are still in need. People need to be delivered from themselves. People need to be transformed. People need to be baptized. And Jesus personified that, taking Isaiah, in the passage in Isaiah, upon himself. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me. Jesus is our example. Therefore, our obligation is to embrace the who and the why. We ought to be engaged. Jesus was engaged. Luke 9:1-10 is about the disciples practicing mission, both from a personal and congregational level. I'm saying that about us, that we must be engaged in mission on a personal level, but also as a congregation, on a congregational level. We have said it over and over again, that mission must not be seen as an activity to be pursued, but as a life to be lived. And hence our study, a theology of mission, the practice and theory of mission. We can't overstate the fact that mission involves word and deed, that mission involves practice and thought. We are big on that. We are big on thought. We are big on mission. It's just like, we are like a bird in that regard with two wings. Have the wing only of practice. Otherwise, we're going to go around in a circle. There must be much thought in relation to mission. Amen. So I thank you. And thank you for the time, 4 weeks. Thank you for engaging me. And maybe it would be a useful time, maybe to have almost 9 o'clock, 1 or 2 questions, over the time again. That's what I'm thinking about. All right. Okay, thank you.
Amen.
Amen, as someone said. Thank you, Dr. Carter. Are there any questions for Dr. Carter?
Yeah, well, not just question, but in anything anybody wants.
Feedback.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yes, any feedback? Well, it's for me, Reverend Carter, it's 4 weeks well spent, and a lot I have learned. My takeaway really is that mission is a lifestyle, and it is not just for the clergy. So once I call myself a Christian, I must be involved in missions. And that's my takeaway over the 4 weeks. I noticed Royina has her hand up.
Good night again. Okay, I just want to say, especially that section that you talk about the small church members matters, how much I endorse almost everything that was said, because I came from a big church where I felt lost and didn't feel like a part of the church. And I remember I used to go from one big church to the next one, about 3 different ones I used to visit every week for about a year or 2, just couldn't feel a part of it until I came to Bethune Avenue. And I tell everybody, the first day I came to Bethune Avenue, I felt a part of Bethune Avenue, and I have not gone back to my church. And especially the part where you talk about intimacy and fellowship, and you know, I heard Reverend Dyer was asking about small church versus big church. But if I were to determine church size, I would choose small church any day over a big church, because I think you are much more impactful in a small setting than in a larger group. And in most large churches, I think most of the members in there feel lost, feel utilized, do not know how to contribute. And what happened is that you have cliches in these churches and you just cannot fit into them. So in terms of impact, I will go any day for a small church. That's my contribution.
Yeah, thank you. But what I, in fairness to, you know, I did make the point that there are some large churches that have been able to bridge many of those gaps, you know, and I really am. Although all of my life most of my life I've been a part of a small church. You know, I also really I do admire some larger churches, and it is also a fact that some churches are small because it's problem. Part of the reason about them small because they have too much problems that them really not dealing with. Yeah, and enough said.
Anyone else?
Yeah, yes, may I again?
Go ahead, Bishop.
Dr. Carter, the supply line officers, this point, yeah, I wanted to get your, clarification on this for me too. This supply line of officers to other stations as a way of glorifying the small church. How do you justify that in terms of missions and growth?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
So supplying of officers to, because that speaks to the sending capacity of the church, the ability to send people outside. Let me say, so, and I did make the point while I was talking about that it is significant that as a small church, Rosetown Holiness Christian Church, it is significant that most of our bishops came out of the Rosetown Church. I think that is something to be proud of. I think that says about our missional agenda, preparing people, the preparation of people. So that is also a part of one's missional thrust, where you are so able to prepare your people and send them out other locations, so that other people can benefit from what we have been benefiting from over these years. So that's what I was thinking of, Bishop. Sorry, just before, Bishop, you have something to say on that? You want to say something about
one small thing?
Yes.
So then, and I stand corrected, So then, the small church in the context of mission mindedness,
Yeah.
or as one speaker said earlier on, the vision or the outlook of that leadership of the small church is perhaps so significant in accomplishing or that goal, that missionary goal. If you understand what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right.
I think that it is a tremendous opportunity.
Okay.
Because of the ability to manage, a smaller number of people. I think it is easier to engage people and for people to engage you.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
The word mission comes from the root word, the Latin word mitto, which means I send. So just the very fact of saying mission, you're talking about sending. And many of our churches, in our human arithmetic, we tend to hold on to our members because we are saying we don't have enough to send out. So we have to hold on to them, and we have to hold on to, if we hold on to our most useful members so that the church can grow and so that the church can, become more effective and so on. But God's arithmetic don't work like that. The word mission has to do with sending. So the church really is supposed to be sending people who are called by God to go to other places, to develop God's work, to plant churches, to make the gospel available to places where it's not available, and so on. And the reality is that churches who send out missionaries, those churches tend to grow. The Lord supplies. I mean, it's not in terms of how we say 1 minus, 2 minus 1 leave 1. I don't know. God does it differently.
Yes.
So we must be prepared as churches to allow our members to go. And God will provide. It's like tithing. It's like giving, you give 10% of what you earn, and God is no man's debtor. So it's the same thing. The church needs to release its members rather than holding on to them by saying we don't have enough to send out. We just barely have so much so we can allow them to go. So that is my understanding of mission.
Well said. And you have heard from a bona fide international missionary who should know. Thank you.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Deacon.
Yeah. What I understand about mission, more than one ways to perform work of missionary. Take for instance, I have a niece who live with me over 3 years now. She is in a wheelchair. And one night, everybody gone. It was COVID, before COVID. Everybody gone to sport. And generally will leave here. And she go to the bathroom and she dropped down in the bathroom. And I couldn't lift her up because she's very heavy. And we called one of the missionary brothers them. And they came. It was so surprising. They came so quickly with the van. And about 3 of them coming here, coming to the house. And then lift her out of the bathroom, put her in the wheelchair and carry her into her room. It was so nice, And I was looking at it and I was looking at that and I said, you see, the Lord provided these men to do these things, and it's more than one way they do this for people. You can call them on the phone if you have a problem and you need help, and they are promptly coming to help. And I mean, those are missions what I look at with great significance, Yeah.
Yeah, very impressive.
Take for instance, the people who I used to see downtown giving to the homeless people them food, box of food, you know, and certain things. I look at those as a great mission.
Yeah.
Mission of mercy, mission of kindness, you know, mission of helping out, you know. I don't know. I adore those missions. I would like to be a part of those missions, you know. Serious thing.
Yeah. Well said. That's very, very inspiring.
Is there anyone else?
Yes, quick. Pastor Carter, you were talking about religion, and I just used Rostone. You were talking about people believing. So some of the guys would go to, the Oberman. So there's a man, and he's blind, and he's a Oberman, and they would go and get them gathering. So I was thinking, because I was in a training last night about intercessory prayer and training and stuff. So, and one of the things that was mentioned in it about mapping. Do you think that sending out persons from our church to come into Rosetown to do mission? Because when you started out, you read the scripture about going in and the old dusting off if persons don't want to accept or whatever. I'm just saying, do you think that doing spiritual mapping would be important before sending?
Explain spiritual mapping for us.
So like finding out about, because I'm in a group where I go every Wednesday morning and do prayer. And so one of the things was mentioned when we pray about, the different, it's not just our community, but it is a transformation group that pray about communities all over. And so they ask about, the things that happen in the community in terms of, and what about the churches. So we know in Rosetown, we have a lot of revival churches. People believe, Rosetown people, generally, some of them believe in Obia. Them wake up, they get up every morning and them throw gallons of water. They believe like people is hurting them shop, them not sell where people want, and it now, they just throw water and stuff. So spiritual mapping in terms of find out how much bars are in the community, how much gambling houses, how much revival churches, those type of things.
Right.
So that they can pray against stuff.
Yes, Patricia, I believe that those things are very, very useful. We need to be aware of the context in which we are operating so that we can engage appropriately, so that we can pray appropriately. Yeah, I believe those things have to be critical. Those things have to be very, very important. Yeah, I agree with that.
Thanks.
If
Someone else?
Yes, if I may follow up with Sister June Simmons' comment on the sending out and so forth. I do remember an era way back when we were so heavenly minded that we had little earthly good. We did little earthly good because we were so heavenly minded, and as a function of that heavenly mindedness, we were also anti higher education and those sort of we were very suspicious of the corruptive forces of wealth and so forth, and not to become entrepreneurs and business people, because those sort of things tend to corrupt, as does higher education. And I do remember, pardon me?
Well, politicians.
Oh yeah. And I do remember Reverend V.T. Williams, I think it was, that had a song about this guy who was sent off with his loyal suit and go to university, and when he came back with his hair all twined, dread and all sort of thing, and said he didn't believe in this God thing anymore. That sort of stuff. And those were the sort of thing, the sort of ideas that surround going to university and that sort of stuff. What we find happened, and one of the things that struck me when I came to Bethune Avenue, was how progressive, the church was very youthful and progressive. They were people who were going places academically, they were aspiring and so forth. And there wasn't any fear of these sort of aspiration becoming corrosive to our spiritual values and so forth. In fact, we were being so adequately prepared that we were leaving Bethune Avenue and going out into these institutions and saying Jesus Christ, and bringing change to people's lives in these institutions, going to college, university, and becoming and aspiring to all the high offices within these institutions, and still maintaining our Christian values and virtue, because we were grounded in the word. The teaching liberated us and did not constrain us to live, within, a sort of bubble, but that we could go out there and live, the Christian life and impact our world, rather than the world having a corrosive effect on our spirituality. And so it's not, I am just applying to what Sister Simmons was saying, another element of this sending out, preparing our people to send them out into the world, right, into various institutions and so forth of the world, and to impact that world, rather than retreating from it because of fear of its corrosive influence.
Well said.
Is there any other person who wants to say something? All right.
Sister Joy.
Yes, Rev.
Yeah, let me just take the opportunity again. I mean, I've said it already, but some people came on late, to thank you all for joining with us. Thanks, Reverend Da Costa, for facilitating this. Malone, who was also instrumental in asking those piercing questions, as well as to thank Omar Neal, who has really instructed me in terms of how to navigate the technology. So yeah, really do appreciate that. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Dr. Carter, just a second. I'm having technical difficulties here. 1 second. Chili?
Joy?
Yes, can you please make my other Joy desktop?
Okay.
Co-host, please, I need to share screen.
Okay.
Good night. Well, while you're switching over, Joy, just
Okay.
want to add my voice to the others that it was very inspiring and stimulating and also timely. In the last bit, Pastor Carter asked the question whether perhaps COVID has caused us to be reviewing our delivery, our outreaches. And I just want to say to us that perhaps there is something there that we could explore in another space. Recently, in another of our meetings, it wasn't mentioned, but in preparing for that meeting, the thought has crossed my mind whether we need to be providing support services for funerals. And even this week, a neighbor whose husband died, a neighbor died, and they were asking, how do you do this funeral thing? And I was saying, boy, it looks like the church needs to at least maybe host a seminar on conducting funerals because of the increased deaths. More to the point is just the importance of tracking change in how we do our missionary work within our local context. And for us to review when and if we need to make adjustments. I just want to thank Pastor Carter for that, because oftentimes we think of mission largely in the traditional sense. But I think when change comes, part of our missionary responsibility is to review how we do mission. So I thank him particularly for making that point. And great job, Pastor. Thank you again.
Blessings, Minister.
All right. On behalf of the senior pastor and the board of directors of the Rosestone Holiness Christian Church and members, I want to thank you, Dr. Carter, for your invaluable teaching on a theology of mission, the practice and theory of mission. Over these past 4 weeks, we have learned a lot. We have many takeaways, and it is now for us to go back as individuals and as a church and put into practice what we have learned here over these past weeks. We just want to take this time out to pray that you will continually be blessed by the Lord as you continue to share what he has taught you, what he has put in your heart, the passion that he has put in your heart, because I know that this is one of your passions, your love for people, and to see that people's lives are transformed. So on behalf of the board again and our senior pastor and the director especially of the evangelism department, I just want to say thank you wholeheartedly. We really appreciated the time that you have taken out to be with us. All right.
Thank you very much, Joy. It was really my pleasure. When can I come and pick up this certificate?
All right, you can talk to the church office.
Okay. Yeah, but when I saw, I thought that it would have been the other way around. The person that give a certificate, but
it's a virtual certificate, virtual presentation now.
Yeah, man. Thanks.
All right, Pastor Joe, I know this is the last session in the series, and I know you will have something to say. So I'll just hand over to you now, Pastor Joe.
Thank you very much, Deaconess Joy Ellis, Joy from above. Thank Dr. Carter for this invaluable presentation. The evangelism ministry and the leadership of the Rosestone Holiness Christian Church, no doubt, note especially the recommendations, and we will revisit the entire presentation, and we will be in touch with you also, and we are happy for the fact that you are always accessible. And so where there is a need for us to explore any concept and to understand in a more fulsome any concept, we will make use of your availability, the fact that you're available for that. And I'm sure, like myself, all persons who perhaps may be or just only able to attend just even one of the sessions would have benefited greatly from such a session. And so we are extremely grateful for the presentations. I also want to thank those persons, those from other churches in our denomination. We recognize Bishop Dyer and Minister June Simmons and other persons, other of our leaders who made use of the opportunity. And we thank those persons who are not necessarily members of the Holiness Christian Church, but you also blessed us with your presence throughout the month, whether it was for one night or 2 nights or all the nights. We are extremely grateful that you shared the time with us, and we are sure that you would have benefited. Feel free to contact us if you need to get further information. If you want to know how to get in touch with Dr. Carter, I'm sure he as a servant of God will make himself available, as he is kingdom minded, as you would have gleaned from his presentation throughout the month. And so thank all. I'm sure we are all primed and ready to do our role, as we are being reminded almost every night that we all receive this ministry of reconciliation. And so if mission is really a responsibility, not just for the clergy, but for all of us. And so God bless you one and all. These are difficult and trying times, but I'm sure God will also use the opportunity to prepare hearts to be receptive, I believe. And one of the points, one of the questions that was asked by Dr. Carter that really struck a chord in my heart is when he asked the question whether or not we should perhaps be clear, very clear, in perhaps in our presentation of the gospel, whether or not we should be at least be clearer in talking about life after death. In other words, it is an opportune time for persons to be reminded that there is hope in Jesus Christ, and I fully agree with that. And so thanks again, Dr. Carter. Thanks again to all. It's been a great month, a great time of presentation. God bless you all. Thanks, Malan and team. God bless you all.
Yeah, much appreciated.
Amen.
All right, thank you, everyone. May the Lord be with you throughout the rest of this week. May he guide you, and that all your dreams and desires will come to pass. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.